Welcome back to my channel. I am Linda and I am an intuitive healer and an awareness coach. And in this channel, we talk about how to apply spiritual and personal development concepts in a practical way so that you can use them to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life. If you find this content helpful, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And thank you for your support. Today's video is for me to share with you some techniques that can help you heal trauma, or more specifically, help you regulate your nervous system, because the memory of trauma is stored in your body through your nervous system. So first, I'm going to give you my definition of trauma, then I'm going to share with you some of the techniques, and then I'm going to tell you why they are helpful or useful. Now, I do want to clarify here that regulating your nervous system is not exclusive to trauma. We can use any of these techniques to help us through a period of intense emotion, be it anxiety, be it fear, intense stress, pain, emotional or physical, etc. And I think we can all agree that over the last couple of years, we've been through a collective period of a very traumatic experience. And even for someone like me who was to some degree emotionally prepared for this, I still experience periods of deep sadness, anxiety, fear, etc. So these techniques are techniques that I used throughout the last few years and that have proven really helpful. And I also use them with my clients, and I have actually recommended it to a few friends. And if they prove to be helpful before, pre-COVID, they are even 10 times more valuable now. So my definition of trauma is actually a pretty lengthy one because, well, I talk a lot. So obviously my definition is going to be a lengthy one. So I decided to break it into bullet points so it's a little bit easier to digest. So I define trauma as an unresolved, painful, or scary experience that, because it was not fully expressed or processed at the moment that it occurred, it drives us to disconnect from ourselves as a way to cope and survive, but then continues to impact us from our subconscious mind long after the event occurs. So from my perspective, once the trauma is healed, it stops being a traumatic experience and it becomes an integrated experience. And what I mean by that is that once the energetic and emotional charge of that experience dissipates, or more accurately is healed, we can then shift our perspective and our perception to focus on the lessons, to focus on what we learned from that experience and apply it to our day-to-day life to live a more fulfilling life. Now, the first technique that I want to discuss is TRE, or trauma release exercises. Now, TRE is a type of somatic therapy, and somatic meaning that we work through the body, through the three-dimensional or third-dimensional physical body. And it is a technique to help us release energy that is stuck in the body from past trauma. Because not only do our minds and our emotions hold the memory of trauma, but our physical body actually holds the memory of trauma itself. Our cells remember the trauma. And this is a technique that can be really helpful, and is especially helpful for people who have any level of resistance or difficulty accessing their emotions, because we can use the physical body as a vessel to get into our deep emotions. Now, a word of caution here: if you are someone who has physical abuse, or part of your trauma is related to physical abuse, any form of physical abuse for that matter, you want to be careful doing this work. And I would strongly encourage you to work, if you're going to do this type of work, I strongly encourage you to do it with a practitioner or a facilitator that is experienced with somatic therapies, in this particular case with TRE. The reason that I say that is because there's already a sense of lack of physical safety. So doing this type of work can be a little bit more difficult. As you're doing that work, it can be very triggering for someone who has physical abuse, and you want to be working with someone who has experience and can help guide, support, and navigate you through that process so that you can do release and relief, and actually it is actually something that is helpful to you and not something that is going to further traumatize you. Now, another technique that I highly recommend and that I use very often in my practice, mostly because it's one of my specialties, but also it's arguably one of my favorites too, is shadow work. And shadow work is nothing more than bringing the subconscious or the unconscious into the light of consciousness. That is, any experience, any event, any emotion that was pushed, be it repressed or suppressed, into the subconscious mind because it was too painful to cope with, too painful to handle, because it was too scary, because it was too hard, whatever the case may be, anything that was pushed into the recesses of our minds, to bring it back into the conscious mind so we can work with it and heal it. Now, there's a lot of different modalities within the area of shadow work. There is, for example, parts work, there is IFS or internal family systems, which is the psychological equivalent of parts work. They're very similar, but IFS is, I think, the psychologically sanctioned version of parts work. But there's a lot of different modalities out there. There is also the completion process, which is the one that I am certified in, and they all are. Inner child work is a way of doing shadow work. They're all really, there could be a lot of different modalities, but they all are working towards the same end goal. So I do find it really helpful, but like I've said with TRE, it is a modality that is important, that if you're going to be doing this work and you have severe trauma, what I would encourage is, really check in with yourself and feel where you are. A lot of these techniques are things that you can do yourself on yourself. But what I generally recommend, if you don't want to work with a practitioner or a facilitator long term, at least try at the beginning 1 or 2 sessions with someone that can help guide, navigate, and support you through that process, at least until you start becoming familiar, not just with the modality, but with your reactions to the different steps and the different modalities that you use. I find that that can be really, really helpful. Now, another modality that I use is soul profiling, and this is really just working with the person's Akashic records to gain information about their soul gifts and their soul potential, but also about the karmic blocks that may be impacting and contributing to their unhealthy patterns in their current lifetime. The other modality that I use, or technique that I use often, is EFT, or also known as tapping. And I find this modality really, really helpful, but my disclaimer here is that I view it as a temporary fix. I view it as a modality or technique that I give my clients, and I actually use it myself, to temporarily de-escalate an intense emotional state. I think a lot of people can view EFT as a healing technique. I view it as a healing technique, but the intent of it for me is more to help you de-escalate and regulate until you can get to a place or a time where you can then go ahead and do a deep dive to gain a level of deeper healing, if that makes sense. Now, the other couple techniques that I want to mention here really quickly are actually very well-known techniques, and the reason why I want to mention them here is because I think they are techniques that are often dismissed when we're talking about deep trauma healing. And one of those techniques is journaling. And the reason why I recommend journaling is because most of us are not as aware and conscious as we like to think we are. And I'm including myself in that, right? So a lot of times we don't really have as much awareness of some of our patterns and some of our deep motivations as we think we do. And journaling is a great technique that, because we're just writing and we're doing it from a place of non-judgment and from a place of expression, right? We oftentimes can gain a lot of information and a lot of knowledge from what's written in our journals. I think the key factor that I think a lot of people forget, and it's something that I actually have done this myself, and this is why I recommend it, is that when you write in the journal, there's a lot of healing and a lot of catharsis in the writing itself, right? In expressing your emotions without judgment, with compassion, and just pouring your soul out into a piece of paper, right? Or whatever, a computer, depending on how you do it, right? But what I think a lot of people miss, and it's one of the things that I found the most helpful about journaling, is going back and reading what you wrote. Because after you do that for a few days and you go back and you start looking at everything that you wrote, you actually can gain a lot of insight and start finding patterns in your behaviors and your emotional states. And the last technique that I recommend for deep healing is meditation. And there's a lot of different reasons why people use meditation. I'm not going to go into all of them, but suffice it to say that a lot of people use meditation as a way to regulate their emotional state, and I do think it's actually really helpful for that. And I think when you're starting and learning to meditate, it is really helpful to just focus on doing the meditation and focusing on awareness, right? But as you get more adept at meditating, you will find that things start shifting. And what I would encourage people to do is to start meditating with the intention of gaining insight. Because once you've been able to meditate and come to a peaceful state of awareness, you can now actually start receiving insights and information, be it from your higher self, your soul, universe, spirit, God, whatever it is that you want to call it. You can start gaining a lot more information and actually using and leveraging that information to make choices, to make decisions, and to live your life. So these last two techniques are very common, right? But I think there's a twist to what I'm recommending you do, or how I'm recommending that you use them to gain a lot more from them. So now I'd love to hear if there are any techniques or modalities that you guys would recommend, not just for other readers or other viewers of the channel, but also for myself, because I'm always learning and there's a ton of things out there that I'm probably not familiar with. So if there's anything that you use or that you've heard of that you think would be helpful to myself or to others, please share it in the comments. I would love to read those. And as always, thank you so very much for your attention. And until next time, namaste.